Invictus Games began with a profoundly noble mission to use sport to help recovery for wounded veterans. But lately, the math isn't mathing on their mission and the way that they run their foundation and program.
Harry's biggest legacy is now facing some of the toughest questions it has ever seen. What was once celebrated as one of his most respected achievements is suddenly being pulled into a growing storm of claims, public debate, and fresh scrutiny. Tom Bower's book Betrayal has sparked a wave of discussion by putting the Invictus Games under an intense spotlight like never before.
Harry and Meghan are having a conniption fit over these reveals. You know how they release parts of a book throughout certain media entities?
Yeah.
Like right before they come out to tease it. Well, the Times is getting all of the best Tom Bower bits for Betrayal.
At the same time, several major sponsors have reportedly stepped away. Questions are being raised about charity, finances, and attention has shifted toward a government document that contains a large blacked-out section. That hidden detail has only added more curiosity, with many people wondering what information was removed and why.
Bower suggests that the 2025 Games in Canada were overshadowed by Meghan Markle's public appearances, referring to the event as the Meghan Games. He cites Canadian executives who allegedly felt Meghan was a distraction and that her presence was more about bling than veteran rehabilitation.
Stay until the end, because the contents connected to that redacted document have become one of the biggest talking points surrounding this entire story. Tom Bower is a well-known royal biographer and investigative author who has built a reputation for publishing books about high-profile public figures, especially members of the royal family. Over the years, he has released several best-selling titles that have attracted major attention for their detailed reporting and controversial claims. His latest book, Betrayal, continues that pattern by presenting what he describes as a series of betrayals involving Prince Harry and Meghan, covering both the period before they stepped away from royal duties and the years that followed.
He's made several highly critical claims regarding the Invictus Games, which we're checking out today, describing them as having become a vehicle for Prince Harry and Meghan Markle's personal brand.
The book has quickly become a major topic of conversation, with supporters and critics alike debating its claims and discussing the evidence Bower presents. The Invictus Games were originally created with a clear and meaningful purpose. Their main goal was to shine the spotlight on injured and wounded military veterans, recognizing their strength, determination, and resilience after everything they had gone through during their service. The competition was designed to give these veterans a chance to rebuild confidence, connect with others who shared similar experiences, and celebrate what they could accomplish instead of focusing only on the challenges they faced. From the very beginning, the Games were meant to honor their sacrifices, inspire hope, and create an uplifting event centered on the remarkable people who had served their countries. Losing a limb or experiencing a life-changing injury can turn someone's entire world upside down. For many veterans, the physical recovery is only one part of the battle. The emotional impact can be just as difficult, with some facing depression, anxiety, isolation, and the challenge of adjusting to a completely different way of life. That is exactly why the Invictus Games were created.
Rather than focusing on veterans, which I can say as a royal reporter, Scott, is something that I hear every Invictus Games, that there are some competitors that feel like Harry and Meghan suck all of the oxygen out of the room and it's not about them.
The goal was to give wounded veterans a reason to keep moving forward, reconnect with others who understood their experiences, and remind them that their strength and determination could still inspire the world. The event was built around hope, recovery, and celebrating the people who had already sacrificed so much for their countries. According to Tom Bower's account, however, that original mission gradually shifted over time. In Betrayal, he argues that the spotlight slowly moved away from the competitors and increasingly focused on Harry and Meghan instead. Bower claims that as the Games attracted more global attention, Meghan also received more public attention during the events. He further alleges that she used the high-profile platform to highlight her fashion choices and promote her lifestyle brand. Bower presents these points as part of his broader criticism, while those involved have disputed his characterization of the events. Harry and representatives connected with the Invictus Foundation have rejected these allegations, saying that Bower's book presents an unfair and misleading picture of the Games and the people involved. They have pushed back against the claims and do not accept Bauer's conclusions. Even with those denials, the book has fueled a wider public discussion, with supporters and critics continuing to debate the issues it raises. For many observers, one question keeps coming up whenever these allegations make headlines. Why do these claims continue to generate so much attention? One reason is that Tom Bauer was not simply commenting from afar. He attended the Invictus Games in Vancouver himself and based parts of his book on what he says he personally observed during the event. In Betrayal, Bauer alleges that funds connected with the games were used to cover expenses such as private jet travel, luxury hotel accommodations, and personal transportation for Harry and Meghan. Those allegations have drawn significant public interest, while the individuals and organizations involved have rejected wrongdoing and disputed Bauer's account.
He's having a lot of issues. So I did write a piece this week, it was an exclusive, about how there are funding issues for Vancouver. So we know he is going to Birmingham this summer to prep for the games next year. And one of the reasons he's going is because he needs money.
The disagreement has become one of the central points of debate surrounding the book and its claims. According to Tom Bauer's account in Betrayal, organizers were instructed to address Meghan as ma'am and Harry as sir during the event. He also referred to the Vancouver competition as the Meghan Games, arguing that media attention had become increasingly focused on the couple rather than the veterans the event was created to honor. Those descriptions reflect Bauer's own reporting and conclusions from attending the games, and they quickly became some of the most widely discussed claims in his book. Whether people agreed with his assessment or not, his observations sparked a fresh round of debate about how the event was being presented and whether its original mission was still receiving the attention many believed it deserved. The discussion did not stop with Bauer's reporting. His claims also encouraged people to take a closer look at the financial side of the organization. As more questions were raised, independent researchers and online commentators began reviewing publicly available records to better understand how the event was funded and how different agreements were structured. Among those looking into the documents was a researcher named Rachel Maxwell, who examined financial records and government paperwork connected to the 2025 Invictus Games. According to reports about her research, what she found caused even more people to pay close attention to the issue. One document that attracted particular interest was the contract between the Canadian government and the organizers of the 2025 Invictus Games. After the agreement became public, readers noticed something unusual during a careful review. One section of the contract had been heavily redacted, with an entire portion blacked out from public view. That discovery immediately caught people's attention because many expected the agreement to be fully transparent.
Meg Yacht grifter who is now calling on a boycott of the Invictus Games, saying there is something not sitting right with this charity.
Especially since it involved a publicly supported international event. The missing section quickly became the focus of online discussions, with many wondering why that specific information had been withheld. According to reports discussing the document, the redacted section related to parts of the event's operating budget and licensing arrangements. Because Canadian government funding for the Invictus Games is generally understood to involve public funds, some members of the public questioned why those details were not visible in the released version of the contract. The existence of the redactions led to speculation and calls for greater transparency, although the redacted document by itself does not establish that any wrongdoing occurred. Even so, the hidden section became one of the biggest talking points surrounding the financial questions connected to the games. As more attention turned toward the financial records, many people argued that any funding connected to public money should be open to public review. Their view was that transparency would help answer questions about how resources were being used and would strengthen confidence in the organization. Critics focused on the section of the agreement that had been redacted, asking why those specific details were not available while much of the rest of the contract could be viewed. That missing information quickly became the center of online discussions, with some wondering whether the redacted section contained routine confidential material or whether there was another reason it had been withheld. The lack of visible details only encouraged more debate and curiosity. Then another development caught people's attention. Reports claimed that, just a few hours later, the Invictus Canada website became unavailable. When the site was reportedly restored, observers said the document they had been reviewing was no longer accessible in the same way. Instead, they found a Dropbox login page that appeared to require users to sign in before viewing certain files. That unexpected change immediately sparked another round of discussion, with some questioning why access to a document that had already been publicly available now seemed more restricted. Others suggested there could have been ordinary administrative or technical reasons for the change, but the timing still drew significant attention. The sudden shift led many people to ask the same question. Why had the document become more difficult to locate or access? Without an official explanation addressing every concern, speculation continued to spread across social media and online forums. The sequence of events became a major topic of conversation, with different groups offering competing interpretations of what had happened and what it might mean.
Charities that have something to hide should not be trusted, especially with so much NGO fraud being exposed in the last few years. And they are calling on Boeing and American Airlines to think twice before donating.
Attention also turned toward the Invictus Foundation's publicly available financial reports. According to those reports, the charity recorded higher revenue than it had during the previous year. At the same time, some observers pointed to figures they believed showed a decrease in the amount reportedly allocated to organizations supporting injured veterans. Those figures prompted additional questions from critics about spending priorities, while the reports themselves became another focal point in the broader public discussion surrounding the games and their finances. Some observers reviewing the publicly available financial reports pointed to figures they believed showed that spending directly connected to supporting veterans had remained relatively steady, even though the organization's overall funding had increased. They also noted reported increases in areas such as executive compensation, cash reserves, and legal expenses. Those observations led critics to question how additional funds were being prioritized and whether a larger share could have gone toward programs that directly benefited injured veterans. Others, however, cautioned that financial statements often reflect long-term planning, administrative costs, and accounting decisions that are not always obvious from headline numbers alone. Even so, the figures became another major topic of public discussion and added to the growing calls for greater transparency. Around the same period, another development attracted attention. Boeing, which had been one of the Invictus Games' major corporate sponsors, was no longer listed as a sponsor. The change represented a significant shift because the company had previously been associated with supporting the event. For many people following the story, the timing raised fresh questions about what might have influenced the decision. Although the specific reasons for the sponsorship ending were not publicly confirmed in connection with these events, the loss of such a prominent sponsor was widely viewed as a setback for the organization, regardless of the underlying cause. Some commentators connected the timing of Boeing's sponsorship change with the publication of Tom Bauer's book Betrayal, noting that the two events occurred relatively close together. That timing led to speculation across social media and in online discussions, with some suggesting there could be a connection. However, no public evidence has established that the book was the reason for Boeing's decision, and multiple factors can influence corporate sponsorship choices. Even with that uncertainty, the overlap in timing continued to generate conversation, keeping the Invictus Games in the spotlight as questions about the organization, its finances, and its future remained the subject of ongoing public debate and increased scrutiny. And for many people, following the story, the questions did not stop there.
The government in Australia has axed funding for Invictus Australia from this year's federal budget, as the organisation's chief executive has urged the government to reconsider this decision. This is all sort of happening just as we speak, as we go to filming.
Attention also turned to Australia after reports that a previously discussed $9 million government funding commitment connected with a future Invictus Games proposal did not move forward. Reports further claimed that the organisation's chief executive learned of the decision only shortly before the government's budget announcement became public. The timing surprised many observers and immediately sparked another round of discussion about what the decision could mean for future planning and funding. While governments can change spending priorities for many reasons, the development added to the growing list of challenges being discussed around the Games. Not long afterward, another change attracted attention when a board member of the Invictus Games Foundation stepped down from their role. Although board changes can happen for a variety of personal or professional reasons, the resignation came during a period when the organization was already facing heightened public scrutiny. Because several major developments were unfolding around the same time, some commentators viewed the departure as another sign that the foundation was navigating a particularly difficult period. Supporters of the organization emphasized that leadership changes are not unusual, while critics argued that the timing only intensified existing questions. Meanwhile, Birmingham, which is expected to host the 2027 Invictus Games, has reportedly faced challenges in securing major corporate sponsorships. Reports about sponsorship discussions have led to concerns over funding, with observers closely watching whether enough financial support will be secured ahead of the event. Organizing an international competition of this scale requires substantial backing from both public and private partners, making sponsorship an important part of the planning process. As a result, any reports of fundraising difficulties naturally draw significant attention. Taken individually, each of these developments may have its own explanation. Viewed together, however, they have fueled a broader public conversation about the future of the Invictus Games. Questions surrounding sponsorship, leadership changes, funding decisions, and financial transparency have combined to place the organization under increased public scrutiny. Whether these challenges prove temporary or signal longer-term issues remains to be seen, but they have unquestionably kept the Games at the center of an ongoing and closely watched debate. And then there is the figure that immediately grabbed people's attention. According to widely discussed reports, the 2025 Vancouver Invictus Games carried an overall cost of approximately 63.2 million Canadian dollars, while involving 543 competitors. Based on those numbers, some commentators calculated that the cost worked out to roughly 118,000 Canadian dollars per participant. That comparison quickly spread online and became one of the most debated financial talking points surrounding the event. Many people began asking how those overall costs compared with similar international competitions and whether the spending reflected the scale and complexity of hosting an event of that size. One comparison that has frequently been raised is with the US Warrior Games, the competition that helped inspire the creation of the Invictus Games. Commentators have noted that the Warrior Games have reportedly operated with a much smaller annual budget, while also serving wounded service members. Direct comparisons between different events can be difficult because they may differ in scope, funding models, locations, and operational requirements. Even so, the contrast in reported budgets has led some critics to question whether resources connected with the Invictus Games have been used as effectively as possible.
Now, I've spoken to sources close to Harry, and of course, they're shocked. They say, they're blindsided by this, as was the organisation in Australia.
Those questions have continued to generate discussion among people closely following the story. Critics have also framed the debate in more personal terms. They ask whether additional resources could instead have supported veterans through items such as advanced prosthetic limbs, home accessibility modifications, rehabilitation services, mobility equipment, or specially adapted vehicles. These questions reflect concerns expressed by some commentators about how funding priorities should be balanced, although they do not by themselves establish that funds were improperly used. The discussion has become part of a broader conversation about transparency, budgeting, and the long-term mission of the Games. Throughout his book, Tom Bauer returns to what he presents as his central criticism. He argues that the heart of the Invictus Games should always be the injured veterans, whose determination and resilience inspired the event from the beginning. In Betrayal, Bauer contends that over time public attention increasingly shifted toward Harry and Meghan rather than the fans, competitors themselves. Harry, Meghan, and representatives associated with the Invictus Games have disputed criticisms of this nature, but the differing views have become one of the defining debates surrounding the organization's recent public image. Harry and representatives associated with the Invictus Foundation have firmly rejected those criticisms, saying that the claims do not accurately reflect the organization or its work. They have disputed suggestions that the focus of the Games has shifted away from the veterans and have defended the Foundation's mission and operations. Even with those responses, the debate has continued, with supporters pointing to the positive impact the Games have had on thousands of competitors, while critics remain focused on the financial questions and other issues raised in recent public discussions. As more reports, interviews, and commentary have emerged, public interest in the story has continued to grow. Different observers have reached different conclusions based on the information available, and the release of Tom Bower's book has only intensified those conversations. Alongside the debate, there have also been calls from some critics for UK regulators to take a closer look at the charity's operations and financial reporting. Whether any additional regulatory action will follow remains to be seen, but the ongoing discussion has ensured that the future of the Invictus Foundation remains under close public attention. The Charity Commission has the authority to review and, where appropriate, investigate registered charities when concerns arise about governance, financial management, regulatory compliance, or public confidence. Whether any particular organisation becomes the subject of regulatory action depends on the evidence available and the Commission's own assessment. As public discussion surrounding the Invictus Games has grown, some critics have argued that the questions raised deserve closer examination, while others maintain that conclusions should be based on verified facts rather than speculation alone. At the centre of much of the recent debate is Tom Bower's book Betrayal, which has brought renewed attention to Harry, Meghan, and the Invictus Games. The book's claims, combined with discussions about financial reporting, changes involving sponsors, and the heavily redacted government document, have kept the organisation in the public spotlight. Although Harry, Meghan, and representatives associated with the Invictus Foundation have rejected key allegations and disputed Bower's conclusions, the conversation has continued to attract widespread interest. Supporters and critics remain divided, and the story continues to generate headlines as people closely follow any new developments. For now, the questions surrounding the Games, the organisation's finances, and its future direction remain part of an ongoing public discussion that shows little sign of fading anytime soon. So, what do you think about the redacted document and everything that has been discussed throughout this story? Do you believe the unanswered questions deserve further explanation, or do you think the controversy has been blown out of proportion? Share your thoughts in the comments below. If you enjoyed this breakdown, don't forget to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and share it with someone who wants to stay up to date on the latest developments. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the Pumis. Next video!